The Chicago Bulls have just 2 games remaining before they hit the All-Star break. So, in today's episode, I want to talk about some of those concerns that might still be a bit of a question before we hit the All-Star break that the Chicago Bulls must figure out. Plus, we got a game tonight versus the Detroit Pistons and a game tomorrow versus the Detroit Pistons. Y'all know we gonna talk about it all, break it down, but you already know you gotta hear the music first.
Cognac gang.
Shot Boys Podcast with the Cognac Boys. I'm Cognac Boy Bobby, and I'm holding it down on today's daily episode. If you tuned in with me today, make sure you go ahead and hit that like button. Make sure you go ahead and subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell as well. The support has been tremendous from you all around there in Bulls Nation. We appreciate y'all, and we hope that y'all continue to go ahead and subscribe to one of the best spots to get your Chicago Bulls content. But hey, let's talk about today's topic. Now, we know that the Chicago Bulls, they go ahead and they face off versus the Detroit Pistons tonight and tomorrow, 2 games before the Chicago Bulls and all the other NBA teams kind of take a back seat and go ahead and prepare and allow the All-Star weekend to begin, to where we celebrate some of our best talent and we show love to those guys that's going to go out there and perform in the skills challenge, and the freshmen and the sophomore and, the upcoming newcomers all throughout the NBA. So a lot of things is going to be readily available for us to talk about when it comes to our Chicago Bulls. Not a lot of participants in this year's All-Star weekend, but we do have some that's going to be on the docket. And you even had Montes Buzelis saying that he going to the dunk contest to win. I'm with it. Those haters that's out there, do what the shirt say. Martin, get the stepping if you hating on Montes Buzelis trying to go out there and get himself a trophy. But I wanted to go ahead and pull up today's episode just to talk about some concerns that the Chicago Bulls might have, or at least for me, as the Chicago Bulls move closer and closer into the All-Star break. Again, just 2 games left before we hit that break, to where we don't see the Chicago Bulls for a decent amount of time before basketball activities resume. Now, starting with tonight, the Chicago Bulls are going to go off and face the Detroit Pistons, and we will have a back-to-back versus the Detroit Pistons. So we'll see them tonight, and then we'll also see them tomorrow. When we talk about the Detroit Pistons, this is a team that is 5-5 in their last 10, but have suddenly crept their way up into the 6th seed in the Eastern Conference for basketball play. Now, when we talk about, and we want to go ahead and focus on my Chicago Bulls, our Chicago Bulls, who a lot of us continues to bang on the desk, bang our head on the desk to try to understand what the hell is our team doing, because we're such a good fan base. We feel like we deserve more. But here are some of the concerns that I have going into the All-Star break for the Chicago Bulls. Number one, I think it's pretty obvious, and I think a lot of you all will agree with me. Number one on the concern list is, what's the status of Nikola Vucevic? We not acting like Nikola Vucevic is hurt. We not acting like Nikola Vucevic is set to be done with the squad right now. But I have a concern and I have a question for the Chicago Bulls. What's next for Nikola Vucevic? If you've been following Shy Bulls podcast for the last few weeks, I have said on numerous occasions that the Chicago Bulls, though it may sound crazy, should go ahead and figure out a way to send Nikola Vucevic on about his business for the rest of the season. I know it sounds crazy. I know that the Chicago Bulls probably wouldn't be on par with this. I know Nikola Vucevic may or may not be willing to do this, but I think that the Chicago Bulls should send Nikola Vucevic home. Personally, I really sit up here and say that the Chicago Bulls should find a way for Nikola Vucevic to remain away from the team for the remainder of the season. Rule number one, or reason number one, is simply he's not a part of the long-term solution for the Chicago Bulls. That's number one. Number two, when you watch Nikola Vucevic play for the Chicago Bulls, he doesn't seem interested at all from my point of view. You can draw it up however you want to and draw it up on your side. But from me watching the games, Nikola Vucevic does not seem very interested in playing with such a young team. And I honestly believe that he's done so much for the Chicago Bulls. He deserves to take a little break so he can go ahead and prepare to move on to his new team this offseason. So I'm sitting here getting ready to go into the All-Star break after these two games versus the Detroit Pistons, looking at Nikola Vucevic like, bro, you deserve better. That's how I look at Nikola Vucevic. I look at Nikola Vucevic as saying that player deserves much better than what the Chicago Bulls have to offer. The Chicago Bulls are moving into what AK, one of the lead guys in the front office, pretty much the lead guy in the front office, because Mark Eversley, you got to put out some type of Amber Alert or APA or whatever it's called to find where Mark Eversley is, because we just simply don't see him. Does he still work for us? I don't know. Can't answer the question. But what I do know is that the future does not consist of Nikola Vucevic being in a Chicago Bulls uniform. Me personally, he should have been gone before the NBA trade deadline. But the Chicago Bulls decided to do other things. They decided to ignore certain offers that was made to them, and they elected to say it's just simply not enough. But if I'm following the history of the Chicago Bulls from what I have seen these past few years, you cannot sit up here and anticipate that the Chicago Bulls will retain Nikola Vucevic, even though he has another year left on his contract. Real talk. I look at that situation with Nikola Vucevic as being, a dicey one, a choicey one, a decision that you have to make for the sense of your team right now. And I say that Nikola Vucevic, since he is not a part of the future plans for the Chicago Bulls, you should send him home. Send him home. Come up with an injury, come up with a reason. Send him home. Nobody will bat an eye. Nobody will be banging or knocking on the door of the Chicago Bulls front office asking why Nikola Vucevic is not playing. If you simply just come out, hey, Nikola Vucevic got an injury, or Nikola Vucevic is dealing with some personal stuff, we're going to allow him some time away from the team. Nobody is going to sit up there and clamor and ask why Nikola Vucevic hasn't returned anymore, because we know that Nikola Vucevic should not be on the team. Personally. It's a personal thing. I look at the Chicago Bulls going out there and making moves for guys like Zach Collins, and then signing guys like Jalen Smith and looking at it like, hey, those two centers, they can work for the Chicago Bulls for the foreseeable future until you go out there and either draft somebody or trade for somebody so you can solidify the front court in a way to where you feel comfortable enough. I know Nikola Vucevic is not a bum. I know Nikola Vucevic is going to give you some double-doubles. I know Nikola Vucevic is capable of providing you with good basketball. However, he should have been on another team. Nikola Vucevic should be on another team if we keeping it a grand. Keep it a grand. Nikola Vucevic should be on another team. So moving into the All-Star break, I'm wondering what's the status of Nikola Vucevic moving forward. I don't necessarily think that the Chicago Bulls have the will, or I don't even necessarily believe there is a rule that you can buy him out now. But I think that with the situation that you're in, with all these young guys that you're trying to evaluate, you have to remove some of the clutter. He's not going to be here for the foreseeable future, so remove the clutter and allow the other guys that you brought in via trade or whatever, allow those guys to see minutes so you can make a good decision on how you want to proceed moving forward. I believe Nikola Vucevic still being here kind of clouds that judgment if you constantly have to play him 30 minutes a game. When you could send his ass home and allow that 30 minutes to be split up between Jalen Smith and to be split up however you want to do it between Zach Collins. Figure it out. So that's one of my concerns for the Chicago Bulls moving into the All-Star break. The next thing I'm really concerned about is the status of Lonzo Ball. I know that Lonzo Ball has been tremendous to get even this many amount of games out of Lonzo Ball. But when I'm coming in here and I'm talking about the status of Lonzo Ball, I'm trying to see, will there be a time within this season to where you say, hey, Lonzo Ball, you can now play back-to-backs? That's what I'm coming to the conclusion of when I'm saying some of the concerns that I'm looking at when it comes to Chicago Bulls player. And when I talk about Lonzo Ball specifically, I'm trying to see how the Bulls proceed with Lonzo Ball moving forward, personally, because I've seen the Chicago Bulls just go ahead and extend Lonzo Ball. So I'm trying to see if at some point this season, is it in their plans to say, hey, Lonzo, you can play back-to-backs now? That's all I'm trying to see. I know he's going to be here for the future, and honestly, I'm not too mad about trying to keep Lonzo Ball on the squad for the sake of the development of the young players. This is a guy that had to work his ass off to get back to NBA basketball. This is a guy that was virtually said to be done. I was one of those guys that was like, bro, I'm not a believer in Lonzo Ball when it comes to this surgery. I necessarily didn't believe it. Lonzo Ball proved me wrong and proved a lot of people wrong to the point to where you like, okay, what's next? That's why I'm bringing Lonzo Ball into this conversation. The next concern is, how does Billy Donovan prioritize his rotations? We just seen versus the Golden State Commanders. What the hell? The Golden State Warriors. Excuse me. I'm still thinking about a little bit of football here, even though the football season is now over and it has concluded. But I'm trying to see, how does Billy Donovan prioritize his rotations? We seen versus the Golden State Warriors that the Chicago Bulls, they said to hell with Dalen Terry. They said to hell with Julian Phillips and said, Trey Jones, Kevin Huerter, get your behinds up in there. I'm trying to see if there's a way within these last two games and kind of moving forward during the All-Star break and coming out of the All-Star break, how does Billy Donovan prioritize those rotations? Do you say, Trey Jones, I think you got a little game, but Dalen Terry has shown me he could be a little bit more effective than you. Kevin Huerter, I know you got a little game, and I know I gave you about 18, 19, 20 minutes in game one with us when you were officially ready to play. But I'm interested to see how Billy Donovan says, hey, we can insert you here and you won't necessarily negatively affect the game. So I want to see how Billy Donovan prioritizes his rotations with the newcomers. How do you get Zach Collins into the game? Because he didn't play in the last game versus the Warriors. How do you ensure that you're giving minutes to guys that have earned those minutes when you look at Trey Jones versus a Dalen Terry? I'm trying to see how that kind of works out for the Chicago Bulls and Billy Donovan. Now, I will say this. Billy Donovan has a tough job on his hands with 9 guards on the squad, and you're trying to pick and pull to see who can be those type of players for the foreseeable future, because honestly, listening to Billy Donovan comments, it doesn't seem like Billy Donovan wants to move on to other things that other than being the head coach for the Chicago Bulls. So that's one thing another thing that I'm trying to look at. How does Billy Donovan prioritize his rotations? Another concern moving into the All-Star break is that I'm looking at is, does Monty Buzelis continue to start? We know that when Lonzo was healthy and not having to face a back-to-back situation, that Billy Donovan had Josh Giddey, Lonzo Ball, Kobe White, Ayo Dosunmu, and Nikola Vucevic starting in the lineup. Do you consider saying, all right, Lonzo, we got enough out of you already, we're going to move you to the bench, and then you continue to start Monty Buzelis? Because the way that I look at it is, Monty Buzelis is the future. Monty Buzelis is the star, the budding star on the Chicago Bulls that they have to invest in so you can see him elevate this team. I believe he has the mentality. I believe he has the talent. I believe he's good enough on offense. Still needs a little more development in that rim. Has enough on defense, still has to develop on that end, but he has enough to where you can say, I bet, let's invest in Monty Buzelis. So my concern, another concern, moves on to saying, does Monty Buzelis continue to start for the Chicago Bulls? Because we know Chicago Bulls and the Billy Donovan thing can get a little bit weird. Do you continue to start your future superstar, or do you say, hey, Lonzo Ball gives us the best chance of winning, we need him in the starting lineup? Because the way I look at it is that Lonzo Ball, you don't necessarily need to start him for him to end games. He can absolutely end games. But I think it's a necessity to have Monty Buzelis start these games and earn his way into the closing lineups, than to say, hey, Monty Buzelis, Lonzo Ball is back, go get your ass back on the bench. You know what I'm saying? It's a bit weird. But hey, the last concern that I have is, how do the Chicago Bulls balance the wins versus development? We heard from AK, we heard from Billy Donovan all season long that these guys want to prioritize winning and winning the most games possible before the end of the season. So my question is, how do you prioritize that versus how do you prioritize the development of the young guys that you have in your locker room? We talking about Matis. We talking about Julian Phillips. We talking about Dalen Terry. How do you get the best out of P. Will? How do you utilize in a correct way Kobe White? The same thing can be said about Ayo Dosunmu. How do you prioritize wins versus player development? Because we've seen situations where Marko Simonovic has not flourished. He's back overseas. We have not seen much of Adama Sanogo. We have not seen Carla Jones, who was the G League MVP, etc., etc. And you can continue on to say, hey, what are we doing here? So I'm interested to see, how do the Chicago Bulls prioritize wins versus player development? I think there has to be some type of cohesion there. I think there has to be some type of marriage there. But I want to see how the Chicago Bulls balance that for the sake of not only now, but for the sake of the future as we continue to move forward into the development of hopefully establishing a winning team that is not only destined for the play-in. So we shall see. Now, before we get up out of here, I want to talk about Montes Buzelis. Montes Buzelis, he's a tough kid. My young fella went out there and said, I'm not going to the dunk contest to lose. I want to go out there and win. And I'm all on board for you, young fella. I'll be sitting there watching during NBA All-Star Weekend. You already know, ladies and gentlemen, the dunk contest is the last event on Saturday night. I need Montes Buzelis to come out there and compete. It's really that simple. I don't want it to come down to Montes Buzelis getting eliminated in the first round before he makes that last round and could potentially win this trophy. I want Montes Buzelis to go out there, receive feedback from guys like Zach LaVine, who was just previously on the Chicago Bulls. Go ahead and do your due diligence and look at some of the other dunk contests from the past. Do your due diligence to go out there and practice good sound dunks that can get the crowd up in the air. Look, bro, let's keep it a bean. Let's keep it a bean. Real talk. Mac McClung won the dunk contest the last 2 years, bro. And if I'm wrong, y'all correct me in the chat. But Mac McClung ain't got the ups or the ferocity or the length or the spark that a Montes Buzelis got. Get your behind out there and go win yourself a trophy, since the Chicago Bulls won't be winning a trophy in June. It's really that simple. It's really that simple. Don't come out here and leave questions for others to say, man, if he would have go ahead and hit that dunk the first time, it would have been a 10. Don't go out there and leave questions for us, big dog. I know Montes Buzelis is made different, in my personal opinion. I believe that Montes Buzelis is different, in my personal opinion, than a lot of the Chicago Bulls players that have entered this team or became players of this team in the last few seasons. Montes Buzelis is a hometown kid. Didn't necessarily grow up in Chicago, but grew up not too far from Chicago in Hinsdale, Illinois. Raised by his parents to go ahead and earn every single thing that he got. So you getting into this dunk contest, you got to earn every single thing that you got, big dog. I'll be cheering for you. I know it's going to be a lot of Bulls fans in this chat that's going to be rooting for you. So go out there and put on an absolute show. I know you ain't going out there to waste your time, but you can say all that if you want to, but it ain't nothing to it but to do it. So you got to go out there and do it. You got to go out there and convert those dunks. You got to go out there and be creative. You got to go out there and get the crowd excited. You got to go out there and put on for yourself. Go ahead and earn yourself a trophy during one of the greatest nights for the NBA within the season. So you saying that you ain't going out there to lose this dunk contest, I'm with you. I ain't mad at you, bro. I'm with you. Go out there and do what you absolutely need to have to do to win this dunk contest. And I believe that Montes Buzelis has a strong chance of winning this dunk contest. Period. But that is it for me today, ladies and gentlemen. We talked about some concerns moving into the All-Star break, and we talked about Montes Buzelis being a part of All-Star Weekend being a part of that dunk contest and hoping that he wins it. So before y'all get up out of here, make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and make sure that you let me know your thoughts down below concerning all topics that we discussed today. I appreciate y'all for tuning in into another episode. Make sure you always see red. I'm out of here. Y'all already know. I'm going to catch y'all on the next one for sure. Peace out, y'all.
Cognac. Gang.